Now I get to service this little fish tank. It's got a couple of swordtails and a couple of black neons. And apparently it recently lost a catfish. So we need to figure out why the catfish died. It's got a little filter there. They obviously feed very good fish food. He's a very handsome man, isn't he? We'll test up the water and see where we're at. So I've started some water tests. Okay. I've got basically no ammonia. I have got a little bit of nitrite. Anytime that I get a test I'm concerned about, I retest it. So there's just a tiny bit of nitrite, and there's basically no nitrate as far as the nutrients are concerned. Now, the reason why we think that might be the case is that advice was given at one stage not to clean the filter. Now, sometimes people develop that impression, but what happens is if you don't clean the filter, it ends up basically filling up with all sorts of crap and ends up giving you nitrite. So it is important you clean the filter, but it's important that when you clean the filter, you need to clean water from the fish tank, not water from the tap, because you need to keep the good bacteria alive. Now, if you ever get nitrite in your water, if you have a good quality water ager, especially with a handsome man like that on it, then you can instantly detox ammonia or nitrite by using a larger dose of this water ager. So if in doubt, give it a good squirt, and as long as you've used at least a 5 times dose, that will instantly detox ammonia or nitrate, so the fish won't even know that it's in the water. Once again, it does not fix it. It only detoxes it, and it gives you time for you to fix the problem. And the problem is going to be make sure your filter is efficient, make sure your fish are not overfed, make sure you don't have too many fish,
don't touch,
and away you go. Now, it's very common for me to carry lots of test kits. That's because sometimes I run out of certain tests, and it's really great just to have a spare test kit ready to go, and I run out and grab the one that I've run out of, and it keeps me working as opposed to not being able to solve a problem through a silly little thing like running out of a pH test. So I've just tested the water in this aquarium, and I'm happy with the pH. It's sort of around 7. And I'm happy with the KH, that's 2. 2 to 4 is a good KH. So this product is actually quite good for balancing the pH at 7 and giving you KH. So this I'm happy with. But the GH is through the roof. And the reason why the GH is likely to be through the roof is that when a water change occurs, a big squirt of this goes in, which as far as the fish is concerned, it's really okay. But the accumulative effect of a big squirt every time means that this can actually raise the GH level, because you actually only need 1 mil per 40 litres. So this tank only requires about 0.5 mil, and a big squirt could be 15 or 20 mils. Very attractive man there. And this one here, just like baking a cake, it's not unusual just to go sprinkle, sprinkle. And if you just go sprinkle, sprinkle every now and then, it really isn't the end of the world. But this raises GH too. So the accumulative effect of big squirt and sprinkle means that your GH level does tend to accumulate. Now, a catfish can be a little bit sensitive to GH, and there is nitrite in the water. So we did lose a catfish in here. So the reason why we've lost the catfish is because we haven't cleaned the filter and because the GH was through the roof. So for future reference, I'd highly recommend that even if it's every 3 to 6 months, grab your phone, make a little video so we can see what's going on with the tank, and also all your bits and pieces, make sure you put them in the video. I want to see what you've got or see what you're running out of. So we want to see what you're using. Bring down the video and bring down a sample of the water, like a little Vegemite jar. Then let us just do a little check every now and then. We can throw it through our spin test machine. It costs $10. It takes 2 minutes. And then we can say to you, hey, guess what? The GH has gone up a bit too much. And over a short period of time, that really isn't going to be a problem. But over a long period of time, your plants are going to suffer and it's not going to be ideal for the fish. So if we can learn anything from today, it would be even once a quarter, bring us a sample of water in a video, let us check on it. That way we can point you in the right direction before there's a problem. Because fish are very, very tough as far as GH and so forth is concerned, but the idea is to discover if you do have a problem and fix it before the immune system of the fish gets challenged to the point where we may actually lose them. Because the other fish in there sort of look surprisingly good. So no matter what aquarium you've got, it's really a good idea to have a thermometer, because your heater will have a thermostat in it, but a thermostat is not a thermometer. So the thing you want to trust is the thermometer. You can get ones that stick on the glass, you can get digital ones, you can get whatever. But for a tank like this, I'd really want to be keeping it at about 25 degrees. These fish are quite good as far as tolerance is concerned. But I'll just leave that in there for a little while and I'll check on it. It certainly feels okay, but I'm not a human thermometer, believe it or not. But we want to keep the tank around 25. Now this aquarium here has actually got plant substrate in it. Now plant substrate, you've got to be a little bit patient when you set these tanks up, because they do release a fair bit of nutrient into the water, so you can't be in a hurry to put your fish in. And the advantage of plant substrates is they release a whole lot of nutrients that are really great for the plants when everything's going well. But if you have a situation like this where maybe the filter hasn't been cleaned and maybe the GH has accumulated over time, the plants have died off, then this plant substrate does make it great for the algae. So these plant substrates can be your best friend when things are going well, and they can be your worst enemy when things are not going so well. Now whenever cleaning an aquarium, I'm very scared of changing more than about a third of the water. Otherwise you can stress the fish. Now what I've done is remove a third of the water. I've put it down in this bucket and I've taken the filter material out and put it in this bucket. Now as you can see, it's very, very dirty because I haven't even touched it yet. So now I'm touching it. So now what I'm doing is just giving this a good rinse out. But what I don't want to do is rinse this filter with tap water, because what's going to happen is good bacteria is going to grow in here, and the good bacteria that grows in here needs to break down the waste from the fish. So instead of doing one big clean, I'd probably want to do this on a semi-regular basis until I get it nice and clean. But that water was actually black before I even touched the sponge. So this is nice and dirty. So we just clean that regularly until we're back on track. So we want to save the good bacteria by cleaning it in water from the fish tank, and this is great for the garden. So once we've actually done that, we can throw this back in here again, and then once that goes back, this is actually wonderful for the garden. So that can just whack that on the lawn. And there's plenty of good nutrients. Now in here, I'm going to highly recommend, there's a lovely gap here, and what I'm going to recommend we do is get some poly filter and cut it to size, cut some little stripes and whack that down there. That way when we push that down, we're going to have poly filter in there, and I'd cut one more little piece here to go on the top as well. Particularly because this tank has a bit of nutrient, a bit of nitrite in the water. I'd really like to see some polyfilter in here, and the polyfilter will help to polish the water. I don't have any on me, but it's definitely something I'd like to see on the shopping list. That and regular additions of this for now, just to detoxify the nitrite, and regular water changes anytime you're detoxifying the nitrite. And it'll be a little bit of a process. We'll get the tank back on track. Now, a very common misconception, conception, whatever that word is that a small tank is easier to look after. That just isn't true, because a small tank changes very, very, very quickly, whereas a large tank is a lot more stable. So where possible, go for a larger tank. For a situation like this on a sideboard, you would be concerned about putting a large tank here due to support. But if we put like a nice leg there and a leg there, then suddenly this would probably be quite a good spot for a larger tank. It's best to get advice from someone that really knows what they're talking about before putting a big fish tank on a shelf that might fall off. Not as fun as you'd think. Now, cleaning up an aquarium is always a process. It's really not like, oh, the fish guy came, cleaned up my tank, everything's perfect. That just isn't the case. It's basically a process. When we're servicing a tank on a semi-regular basis, we'll get it all under control. So it is the case where the fish guy comes, clean up the tank, and the tank looks great. But if you're in a position where there's a bit of catch-up involved, often the fish guy comes, cleans up your tank, it actually looks worse because it's like a step in the right direction. So it is not the case where we just come, magically everything's okay, and then suddenly you've got a wonderful tank. There is always a bit of catch-up involved, and that's something that not everyone understands. Sometimes I'll come, clean up the tank, make it much better than it was, and then sometimes it can actually temporarily be worse, particularly because we disturb a whole lot of stuff, potentially release gases that are not so nice. So it can even be a step backwards to get a step forward. So that's just the reality of a tank service. But if we can point you in the right direction, allow you to understand anything that maybe was going wrong, or we just got to come back a few times until we actually get it right. The other thing I'd point out, I mean, this is a fluval tank, which is quite a good quality tank, but be very careful with any of your cheap Chinese tanks with lights, because lights and water are actually not that fun. So it's really important that you get a waterproof light. I'm not sure if this one is. It probably is, by the way, but I don't know. But making sure you got a waterproof light, because every now and then you end up splashing the light, or the light ends up in the fish tank, and getting a zap from a fish light is not something you want to be involved in. And it's happened to me, and it's not that fun. So that's why I really love the Aquarium brand, because everything they sell is completely waterproof. So you just got to be a little bit mindful and a little bit careful. Just being mindful with aquariums too. With these aquariums with side filters, they're actually like they're pretty good, these side filters, but the thing you need to be aware of is what's called the sump. So the sump area of a filter is where the pump draws from, and that's where your evaporation comes. So basically the water's going to evaporate out of this tank, and evaporation is unbelievable. You cannot believe how much water evaporates until you have a fish tank. Now what's going to happen is the water's going to go down through here, going to go past our biological and mechanical media, and then it goes into this side. And in this side we have a heater and a pump. So we need to make sure this heater stays under the water, otherwise it cannot heat, and then it might end up making the tank cold. In this case the tank was 20 degrees, so we really want it 25 degrees, so that needs monitoring. And then that's where the pump is, and that will evaporate down very, very, very fast. So it's really important that every day or every couple of days, just put a little tiny bit of water in the tank, because it will just keep evaporating and evaporating and evaporating. And that's particularly a problem with these filters, because this whole surface area comes down to that. Whereas with a normal tank, it will just evaporate down the whole tank. So it will take a lot longer until you notice. This one you'll notice in literally days. Just something else to be aware of. And we want to make sure this outlet is agitating the surface. Make sure we've got plenty of good oxygen. And step by step clean this tank up until it looks exactly how we wish. Now, fashion-wise, having the heater in the sump is very cool, because it doesn't have to be in the tank. But function-wise, it sort of sucks, because that's where your evaporation is. So this heater is working. I just tested it. But if we wanted to be clever, we could actually put the heater here. Now, the disadvantage of the heater here is that it's going to be there. Sort of nice if it's not there.
I like it there.
Now, fashion-wise, this is the winner. Function-wise, this is the winner. Because that way we don't have to worry about the sump going down and the heater being out of the water, which could malfunction the heater, and also the heater can't work if it's out of the water. Now when we do clean an aquarium, particularly if it's one we haven't cleaned for a while, often our visibility is terrible once we start disturbing things. So you just got to be a little bit understanding about that. So as the tank clears up and as you start seeing algae that we can't see, then just give it a bit of a clean. And there is a little device called a flipper, which is just a little magnet with a razor blade on it. And I love them. They really make your life easy. The other thing that makes your life easy too is having a pair of plant tongs, because you can get a couple of them and just easily plant them, as opposed to putting your hand in there and overflowing the tank. And also when you plant stuff yourself, it really just doesn't plant as well as plant tongs, because plant tongs are very efficient just for getting in there and giving it a, just for planting it. There's a bit of algae. Plant tongs are really worth it. Just little silver tongs. So I'm just going to give that. Let that clear and it will all start looking nice. Okay, so that's clean one out of the way. We've put a little bit of new plant in there, and we've gone with rock fern because rock fern is one of the easiest plants to grow. It's a very, very tough plant. Now, if the rock fern turns yellow, then we need to increase the amount of fertilizer. And due to this gravel, I'm very skeptical that that would ever be the case. If it gets black growing all over, we can use a product called Carbomax, and that helps to get rid of that. And if it falls apart, that usually means there's not enough light. And in this case, I don't think that would be the case. So I'd like to see this light on about 6 to 8 hours a day. And then give this tank some time. And then next time we've just got to clean up the tank a lot better, because this time we focused on the filter. You don't clean up everything at once or you can actually shock the fish. And it's nice to have a lid, because it's nice to keep the fish in the tank, because they don't do so well on the floor. So it'll clear up very quickly. Like it's really clearing up already, and we don't want to replace the catfish until we're 100% happy with the water quality. So it's literally clearing as we're watching.
Light on in the morning and pops up.
So this tank may or may not have a coolie loach in it. Coolie loach is such awesome little fish. They're like a little stripy wiggly worm that just run along the bottom of the tank. The only thing is that half the time you put them in there and you never ever see them again. And I've actually had situations where I have not seen that thing in months, and then bingo, one morning out he is. So whenever you buy a coolie loach, just be ready to be disappointed, because it may or may not be the best thing you ever bought, but geez, they're cool. It is amazing how fast fish tanks clear up, because in the time that I've had a little bit of a chat, this water has cleared up unbelievably fast. So I reckon by the time I get home, it will actually look clear. It's actually starting to look pretty cool.